Okay, so we're going to start reviewing for our test on 48 hours. So you're going to need your paper that says part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. I'm going to go through all these problems. Now, I'm going to go through about 22 problems, but this is all you're going to be doing in the class period. So your responsibility is to pay attention and write down what I am doing. Write down anything that I say that you need to draw or have down. If you need to pause. If you need to move on, then keep going on. But I will check that everything is written down before you leave my class. All right, so let's begin. All right, so part 1 is going to be everything about slope. So we're going to be reviewing about 6 or 7 problems on different types of problems that deal with slope. So let's go. Okay, problem 1. We're given a table, and in this table it says distance in miles 3, 7, 11, 14. And then we're given costs, which is the increments of 20, 30, 40, 50. So, looking at the answer choices below, we need to find out which equation represents the table above. Well, anytime we're given a table, the first thing I want you to think about is slope. So slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I want you to take the time and write down this table on that paper. So press pause and start writing. Okay, so you should have already written down this table on your paper. So now we're going to label your tables. You're going to write x1, y1, and you're going to write x2, y2. So now we're going to plug those values in our equation. So our y2 is 30. My y1 is 20. All over. Now I'm going to go to my x value. So it's going to be 7 minus 3. When you put it in your calculator, you're going to get 5 halves. If you don't get 5 halves, it's because you typed something wrong. This is the time when you go up and ask me and say, hey, Miss Blue, I did not get this equation. Okay, so now this is our slope. It's 5 halves. So now we're going to look at our equations. So let's scroll down, and we have these 4 equations given to us. Well, A has a negative 4 in front, so it's not going to be A because I want a slope of 5 halves. C, same issue. So now we're between B and D. In order to find slope, we have to put it in y equals. So I'm going to rewrite this question in y equals. How am I going to do that? Well, this 5 halves is on the left. To move it to the right, I'm going to use the opposite. So if that's a positive 5 halves, I'm going to subtract 5 halves, x, on both sides. So what you need to write down on your paper is you're going to write this equation. So press the pause button and you're going to write 5 halves x plus y equals 13. After you write this equation, then you're going to subtract 5 halves x on the left and 5 halves x on the right. When you're done, you should get y equals 5 halves x plus 13. Well, this has a slope of 5 halves. However, we need to make sure that D does not work. So now I want you to take your pencil and I want you to write 5 halves x minus y equals 13. So we're going to try to do that one. So on your paper, you should have 2 equations, and this is the second equation you should be writing down. So 5 halves x minus y equals 13. So now, in order to move 5 halves x to the other side, we're going to subtract 5x, just like we did before. If you're wondering why we're subtracting, well, that's a positive 5 halves on the left. So now I have negative y equals negative 5 halves x plus 13. Okay, so then we have a negative slope, and we don't want that, so we're good to go. So my answer is B. Now make sure you're not just writing the answer as B because you're not going to get any credit for this work. All right. Problem 2, we have a word problem. Now, I'm not going to ask you to write everything on this word problem on your paper. What I'm going to ask you to write is his height is represented by the equation, etc. How quickly does the kid fall into the pool? Before you give me the look of, that's pretty much the entire word problem. Well, yeah, but you have one less sentence to write. So on your paper, you need to have these key words. Write this down and then press pause before you want to keep going. So, you should have already written y minus 6 equals negative 2 parentheses x minus 3. You should also have the sentence written down, how quickly does the kid fall into the pool? Quickly deals with rate. And what I'm writing down, you'll need to write down. So rate also means slope. So what is my slope? Well, my slope is always a number in front of parentheses. So right here is my slope. So he's going to negative 2 is how quickly he's going in there. Now, they didn't give us any units, so we don't have to be specific. It can be negative 2 minutes. It can be time. It can be seconds. So basically what you need to remember is that the number in front is always my slope. As soon as you see an equation with this, you think of the number in front of the parentheses. Okay, there is a typo in here. That's supposed to be a 10. That's supposed to be a 12. And that's supposed to be a 16. Okay, so what I want you to do before we move on is, given this table, I want you to write it down and try to find the slope before you move on. So press pause and write down the table and try to find the slope. So now we're going to verify if you found the slope correctly. So I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. So my formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, if you didn't do the slope on your own, what I'm writing, you need to make sure that you have on your paper. So my y2 is 16, my y1 is 15. So I'm going to do 16 minus 15. My x2 is 10, my x1 is 8. So I'm going to do 10 minus 8. When I get that, I should get a 1/2. So my slope should be a fraction. So I'm going to label that as slope. So anytime I see a table, the first thing you got to think of is slope. Okay, so now we're given a bunch of equations over here. And looking at it, I can get already rid of A and I can get rid of D. The reason why is that my slope is a 2 and I want a positive 1/2. So now we're between B and we're between D. Now there is a typo as well. I'm so sorry for this. This is going to be an x plus y. So the first equation I want you to write is 1/2 x plus y equals 16. Okay, so now we want to get y by itself, so we're going to make our wall. And that's a positive 1/2, so you're going to subtract 1/2 x to both sides. You need to write this on your paper. So when we do this, this cancels out, and now we get y equals negative 1/2 x plus 16. Well, this is a negative slope. I don't want a negative slope, so it's not going to be B. Now let's just double check the C works. So for C, I'm going to erase this problem that I had before that you should have already written. If you did not get to write it down, press pause and rewind, and then you can put it back on. So now I'm going to put 1/2 x minus y equals 16. I'm going to make my wall. And now I'm going to subtract 1/2 just like I did before. So now I have negative y equals negative 1/2 x plus 16. Well, am I done? Heck no, I got this negative coefficient here. So if I have a negative coefficient, I'm going to divide by that number. And when you put a negative and a negative on a calculator, what happens is it becomes positive. So my equation should be y equals 1/2 x minus 16. And it has a positive slope, so D is my answer. So again, when you see a group of tables on a value, you're going to find slope, and then you're going to look at your equations and see which ones give you that slope. it will only be one of the answers. They're purposely going to give you one that has a negative, and they're purposely going to give you one that's a positive. You need to make sure that you double check. Okay, so now we're trying to find the slope that passes through the points. What I need you to do right now is press pause and copy down the sentence. If you feel comfortable in having to solve it and you want to try to make sure that you understand it, go ahead and try to find the slope. Then when you're ready, press play and see if you did it correctly. So you should have paused it and tried on your own, and now I'm going to show you how it should be done. So I'm going to label this as x1, y1, and I'm going to label this as x2, y2. So my formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so when I plug it in, I get 2 minus 4 over 3 minus, now hold up, I got another negative, so I'm going to put that in parentheses. Okay, excuse me. So now I have 2 minus 4 equals negative 2 over 8. And when you put it in your calculator, you should get a negative 1/4. And that's how you find slope. If you did not get a negative 1/4 and you got a different answer, it more likely is because it's something you typed in wrong. If you want to check it with a partner next to you, you can go ahead and check it. If you want to raise your hand and say, hey, Miss Blue, I don't know how to put this in the calculator, go ahead and ask me. I will gladly help you. Okay, so we have a slope of a graph. So what I want you to do is draw a sketch of this graph on your paper and then try to see if you can figure out the slope. Now remember, on the whiteboard, on the side where the door is, there is hints on there. So try to guess it on your own. What you always see is that when it's up and down, it's always x equals. So anytime it's x equals, the slope is going to be undefined. So I'm going to repeat that one more time. When you see a graph going up and down, it's undefined. Always. All right. I want you to write this question on your paper. I do not need you to write A, B, C, or D. What I do need you to write is, what is the equation all the way to the question mark? Once you do that, press play. Okay, so you should have already written down the sentence on your paper, and now I'm going to show you how to do it. Point slope form, it's on that formula sheet that's on your desk. It's given y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. This is always my slope, and by this is always m, okay? So what I'm going to do is simply write x1, y1, and then I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to label this as m. Now all that we need to do is plug it in, so I'm going to write y minus 12 equals 5 over 6 times x minus, well, hold up, we got another negative, and this is when we have to put the parentheses, negative 9. Okay, this two negatives become a positive, so now you get y minus 12 equals 5 over 6 times x plus 9. And it's D. Notice, look what they did to you to mess you up. They purposely switched 9 and 12 for B and C, and they forgot to put the extra negative over here, because a lot of you make that mistake. Remember, they know the mistakes you make, so they're going to keep putting that on there. Make sure you have written everything I have on here before you move on. Okay, first step, draw this graph on your paper. Press pause while you're drawing, and then press play when you want to continue. I see a graph that is going horizontally. Every time a graph is horizontally, is always going to hit the y-axis. So at the y-axis, it hits it at 2. So my equation for this is y equals 2. Please write this on your paper. When it's left and right, my slope is always going to be 0. So y equals 2, and my slope is going to be 0. That is all you need to worry about. All right, so now we're going to do domain and range. So now we're done with slope. Now we're going to review stuff that you probably haven't seen for a while, but we're going to bring it back. Problem 1. Okay, so we're trying to find the domain of this problem. What these numbers are on the side is a little bit fuzzy, but that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? And these are solid dots. So my domain is my x values. So you're going to write domain is my x values. So that means it goes from the left to the right. So how far am I on the left? I'm starting at 0, so I'm going to write a 0. How far am I going on the right? Well, I'm going to trace it right here. It's going to 4. Domain is x, so I'm going to put x in the middle. And since it is closed circle, you're going to write these lines underneath. Another example of this, so I'm going to move this to the side, okay, which you're also going to draw on your paper, is if it looks like this. Okay, so now what a lot of people don't realize is that when you don't have an closed circle, they sometimes just put a line there. That's the same thing. So if I put this as a 0 and I put this as a 5, okay, my domain is going to be 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 5. So the only time you don't have this line is if it doesn't look like this, where it's a solid line, or it doesn't have a solid circle. So 90% of the time, if you don't see an open circle, put that line underneath. All right, so now we got this graph right here. And what I want you to write is the words domain and range, and I want you to draw the picture again. Now I know before we had this picture, but we were finding the slope. So I'm going to write that again. So the slope, when it's up and when it's side to side, is going to be the slope is 0. Since my equation hits the y-axis, my equation is y equals 2. Now my y is my range. So my range is also y equals 2. Okay? So we found our range, and now we need to find our domain. Well, this is the easiest way to remember domain. If I have 2 arrows, my answer is going to be all real numbers. So I'm going to explain that one more time. If my domain has 2 arrows, it's going to be all real numbers. If you don't see 2 arrows, you can't put this down. So what you need to write down is domain is all real numbers when there are 2 arrows. I am going to check for those 2 words. Okay. Now, you don't need to write down this problem, but if you do, you're going to get extra credit for it. So Anna is paying for her dinner with a $50 bill. The amount of change she receives, which is y, depends upon the cost of the meal. What is the range of the function described by the situation? Okay. In real life, she only has $50. So she can only spend up to $50. Does she have to spend all of her money? No, it doesn't say she has to pay $50. So it can be less than 50. Range is always y. But here's the issue. Okay, the issue is that you can't be in debt. You can't go to a place and owe them money because she has $50 bills. So if it can't be negative numbers, you're going to put a 0. And same symbol here, it can't equal 0, so it's going to be less than or equal to y. I guarantee you, on anything you see, they're going to write this as well. They'll have this as, let's say, A. For B, they'll say y is less than 50. For C, they can tell you 0 is less than or equal to y. For D, they'll tell you 0 greater than y greater than 50. They'll keep the right numbers, but it's in the wrong direction. So trick of the trade is the inequality always faces this direction from least to greatest. So it's always going to face this way. All right, now we're going into linear inequalities. So make sure you have your calculator on you because you're not going to be able to do these without the calculator. You're going to press delete. And then you're going to get the options of greater than, less than, whatever. You're going to pick the symbol on how to do it. If you are stuck on how to use the calculator for this, raise your hand and ask me for help or ask the person next to you. All right, so now on your graph, you're going to have a dotted line. My y-intercept is at 3/2, and my slope is 3/8. So I know it's positive, so I'm going to draw a sketch. And it's going to look something like this. And you should have it shaded this way. If for any reason it doesn't look that direction, please raise your hand so I can help you. Alright, so now we're going to have another one like this. So press pause and try this on your own. When you're ready to check it, then press play. Alright, so first step, I'm going to make my wall. And I'm going to move negative 9x to the other side. So if that's a negative, I'm going to put plus 9x on one side and plus 9x on the other. So now I have 15y is greater than or equal to 9x plus 12. Okay, so I have a coefficient of 15, so I'm going to divide everything by my coefficient. When I put it in my calculator, I get y is greater than. Simplify this. To simplify, just type it in your calculator, and you should get 3/5x. Again, you should simplify the 12/15 using your calculator. and you should get 4 over 5. All right, so now when I'm graphing this, I know this line has an underneath, so it's going to be solid. So I'm going to have a solid line, and that's a greater than symbol, so it should be shading above. Make sure you can draw the perfectly sketch on your calculator, because if you're not able to do it, you're not going to understand about 6 questions on the test. All right. Now, we have a different scenario here. It's asking which point is not a solution. So the key word is not. In order to check if it's a solution, what we need to do is that we need to plug in these values and see if it works. So, remember, this is x and this is y. So before you have a brain fart, I suggest you to write x and y on all of these. Okay, so I'm going to plug in a. So my first for a, and this is what you need to write down, is 8 times 4 greater than 0 minus 6. So when you put this on your calculator, it should say true or false. If you forget how to put the inequality in your calculator, you're going to press Control and the equal sign. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then wait till I show this in class again. So your calculator should say true. But we don't want it to say true, we want it to say false. So we're going to do it again. So we're going to do 8 times 0 must be greater than 0 minus 6. Well, on your calculator, it should say true. We don't want B, we don't want A. Let's try C. So now we're going to do 8 times negative 5 should be greater than negative 2 minus 6. Your calculator should say false. That's the one that is not a solution, so you're going to pick C. Make sure you're able to put this into your calculator. I don't need you to know the answer for C. I need you to be able to practice it and do it on your own. All right, now we're going to be doing with parallel and perpendicular lines. So we are now in part 4. So we're given the equation 3x minus 4y equals 5, and we want to know that's parallel. So what I want you to write down is the line and the word parallel. So parallel. Same slope. That's what we need to worry about. So we're given an equation, so I'm going to write this equation on the whiteboard here. I need to solve for y. Do not tell me that slope is 3, because you can't find slope unless you solve for y. So I'm going to make a wall, and I'm going to subtract 3x on both sides. So now I have negative 4y, don't forget that sign, equals negative 3x plus 5. I'm not done. I need to get rid of my coefficient. My coefficient is negative 4, so I need to divide everything by negative 4. So when I do that, I should get on my calculator y equals, now this is when the simplifying comes into play, 2 negatives becomes a positive, so you need to be able to make sure you can check this on your calculator, minus 5 over 4. Okay, so we need something with a slope of 3/4. How do I know I need a slope with P4? Well, it's parallel. Parallel is the same slope. So looking at my answer choices, the only one with a parallel slope is A. This one is negative, and this one has a 4 on the top, and same with D. Okay, so let's do it again. We need to write an equation that's also parallel to this. So press pause and try this on your own, and then check your answers with me. So you should have tried this on your own, and now I'm going to do it so check your work. So I'm going to subtract 2x on both sides. And now I have negative 5y equals negative 2x plus 12. My coefficient's -5, so I'm going to divide by -5 on both sides. So now I have y equals, check with your calculator, so you should get 2 over 5x minus 5 over 12. So if I want something parallel, I need to look at my answer choices and look for something that's 2 over 5. Okay, another parallel question. A line has a slope of 2/3, and we want a line that's parallel to the line, that line, and passes through the point 0, 4. Okay, this is when, if you're given a slope, so I'm given a slope and a point. So when this happens, you're going to use the point slope formula. So I'm going to write point slope. Alright, so my formula is, on your reference sheet, you should have y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm going to label this x1, y1. We've done this before. And we have a slope of 2/3. I want parallel, so that means it's going to be the same thing. So I'm going to write y minus y1's 4 equals my slope, which is 2/3, times x minus 0. Okay, now we're going to distribute. So now I'm going to get 2/3 x. 2/3 times 0 is 0. And I'm going to bring down y minus 4. I have to move 4 to the other side, so I'm going to add 4. So my equation is y equals 2/3 x plus 4. The thinking you have to do is, I'm given a slope, I'm given a point, I'm going to put it in point slope. Then I need to distribute and combine like terms. The slope, if it's parallel, is going to be the same number. Now, here's something different. It says perpendicular. And it is perpendicular to the y-axis. So the only thing you really need to worry about is those T key words. So what I want you to write on your paper for problem 4 is write perpendicular to the y-axis. So the y-axis looks like this. Perpendicular is not the same slope. Perpendicular line looks like this. Is where you make the 4 right triangles. Now you get to learn more about that in geometry, but what you need to realize is that this slope is my x-axis. So this line right here is left and right, and we discussed this before. My slope is going to be 0. So you don't need to worry about anything else. You just needed to draw the y-axis, draw the x-axis, and when it's perpendicular to it, the slope is 0. So my answer is going to be D. All right, key features of graphs. Okay, so what I want you to do before you do anything else is to copy this picture to your paper. And what we want to find is the x and y intercepts. Press pause and then continue. Okay, so your x-intercept is where it hits the y-axis. So right here. So this is my x-intercept when x equals -2. My y-axis is my y-intercept. So my y-intercept is when y equals 4. So y-intercept hits y-axis. X-intercept hits x-axis. Last problem. Okay, so we're given an equation, and what I want you to do is that I want you to draw this onto your paper. Last thing, the drawing. Okay, so my y-intercept is what we need to know to make an equation, and I need to know my slope. So an equation is always in y equals mx plus b. So I first have to find my slope and my y-intercept. My y-intercept is what hits the y-axis, so 15. My slope is how much I go up. So here, notice it's going from 15 to 20, so I'm going to go up 5. And I'm going to the right. So from here to here, it's 30. And from here to here is another 30. So I'm going to the right 60. So my slope is y equals 5 over 60x plus 15. And that's my equation. All right. Now, once you are done writing all of this, then pay attention to the whiteboard, and you're going to begin the next step for review, and then you are good to go. Thank you.